All right, let's dive into some water conservation techniques today, especially for those of you out there who are gardeners.
Absolutely. It's a great topic, and it's becoming even more important as time goes on.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on two main things,
Huh?
rainwater harvesting and drip irrigation.
Excellent choices. Two of my favorites.
Yeah, mine too. So let's kick things off with rainwater harvesting. I mean, it seems kind of obvious, right? Like, why not use what nature gives us? But what else makes rainwater so good for our gardens?
Well, for one, rainwater is naturally soft,
Okay.
unlike what comes out of our taps.
Yeah.
And it's free of the chemicals that can sometimes, mess with the soil.
So it's like giving our plants a special treat, a little spa day.
Yeah, exactly. And it has benefits beyond the garden, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, when we use rainwater, we're easing the strain on our water systems.
That makes sense.
Plus, it reduces stormwater runoff, which can often carry pollutants, and it helps prevent erosion, too.
So it's a win-win for the garden and the environment.
You got it.
All right, I'm sold.
Great.
So how do we actually, catch this rainwater?
Well, you could just put a bucket out there, but
Yep.
for a more efficient setup, think rain barrels. You put them under your downspouts, add a screen to keep out the debris, and you've got your own personal water supply.
And I imagine you could even connect multiple barrels if you wanted to, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I've seen some pretty impressive setups with multiple rain barrels all linked together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a water park for your plants.
I love that. Okay, so before everyone runs out and builds their own backyard reservoirs, are there any rules about rainwater harvesting? And how do we stop our rain barrels from becoming mosquito breeding grounds?
Great questions. Local regulations can vary, so it's always a good idea to, check those out.
Right.
As for mosquitoes, a good screen and a tight lid should do the trick. And don't forget about regular cleaning to prevent algae buildup.
Especially if we're using that water for a veggie.
Exactly, yeah.
Speaking of veggies, any extra precautions for using rainwater on edible gardens?
You might consider a first flush diverter.
What?
It basically diverts the first bit of rainwater away. That initial flow can sometimes pick up stuff from the roof that you don't want in your veggies.
That makes sense. Smart. Okay, so we've got rainwater covered. Let's move on to another water-saving champ, drip irrigation. So this method delivers water right to the roots.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Minimizes waste and evaporation.
No more sprinklers watering the sidewalk.
Exactly. And the great thing about drip irrigation is that there are different systems for different needs. You've got soaker hoses for a simple setup, and then you've got more complex systems for larger gardens.
And here's where it gets really cool.
Okay.
We can actually hook up our rainwater harvesting system to our drip irrigation.
Yes.
Talk about sustainable gardening.
Yeah, you're talking, yeah. It all comes down to working with nature.
I love it. But before we move on, I know we've got a few other water-saving tips to cover.
Oh, we do. Mulching, for example.
Okay, yeah.
It's like a protective layer for the soil.
Okay.
Helps it retain moisture.
Right.
It's like giving your garden a nice cozy blanket.
I like that. So mulch helps keep the soil moist. What about choosing the right plants in the first place?
Ah, yes. Drought-resistant plants. They're the true heroes of a water-wise garden. They thrive in drier conditions, need less water overall.
So it's all about picking the right plants for our climate.
Yeah.
Smart gardening.
Exactly.
I love it.
And if you really want to step up your water conservation game, you got to look into xeriscaping.
Xeriscaping. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. It's basically designing your landscape specifically for dry conditions.
Yeah.
Using those drought-tolerant plants we were talking about and, all these water-saving tricks.
So it's like working with nature instead of against it.
Exactly. It can be incredibly beautiful, too. You're almost painting with plants and creating this amazing landscape that needs very little water.
Sounds pretty cool. I'm definitely going to check it out. But for now, let's get back to some of those other water-saving tips. I'm really curious about mulching. It seems so simple, but why is it so effective?
Well, think of mulch like a shield for your soil. It protects it from the sun and wind, which can really dry things out.
Right.
So the soil stays moist for longer. And as a bonus, mulch helps regulate the soil temperature too, keeping it cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter.
So it's like a little climate control system for the soil.
Exactly. And that's not all. Mulch also helps keep those pesky weeds down.
Okay, I'm sold. Mulch is my new best friend.
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of mulch is best? Do you use wood chips or straw or something else?
There are tons of options. Wood chips are a classic choice, and they break down gradually, enriching the soil as they do.
Oh, okay.
Straw works well too, especially for vegetable gardens because it keeps the soil clean. And you can even get creative and use things like shredded leaves or grass clippings.
Wow, that's amazing. Sounds like you can really tailor it to your garden.
For sure. The important thing is to do a little research and find what works best for your plants and your style.
Great advice.
Hmm.
So we've got rainwater harvesting, drip irrigation, and mulching down. What else can we do to become water-wise gardeners?
Well, we've got to talk about choosing the right plants.
Oh, right. Drought-tolerant plants. They're like the superstars of a water-wise garden.
Absolutely. They're tough, they can handle those dry spells, and they come in such a variety of colors and shapes, you know? You can really have fun with it.
I'm all about those low-maintenance beauties.
Hmm.
But how do I know which plants will do well in my area?
Your local nursery can be a great resource for that.
Okay, good to know.
They can help you find plants that thrive in your specific climate and soil type. And of course, there are online resources too, like plant databases and gardening forums.
So it's all about understanding our local ecosystem and picking plants that are already adapted to it.
Exactly. And once you've got your plants, try to group them together based on their water needs. You know, that way you can water them efficiently without overwatering or underwatering any of them.
Smart. It's like creating little microclimates in your garden.
You got it. And speaking of watering, did you know that how you water can also make a big difference in water conservation?
Oh, really? Tell me more.
It's all about watering deeply but less often. Instead of giving your plants a little sprinkle every day, aim for a good deep soak once or twice a week. This actually encourages their roots to grow deeper, which makes them more drought tolerant over time.
So we're actually training our plants to be more self-sufficient. Like it.
Yeah.
And what's the best time of day to water?
Early morning is ideal. Watering before the sun gets too intense gives the plants a chance to soak up the moisture before it evaporates.
That makes sense. Now, what about those fancy watering gadgets? Are they worth the investment?
Oh, there are some cool gadgets out there like soaker hoses and drip irrigation systems, even smart controllers that adjust your watering schedule based on the weather.
Yeah.
But honestly, the most important tool you have is your own observation. You know, pay attention to your plants, learn what they need.
Right. We've got to become plant whisperers.
Exactly. And while you're observing your plants, keep an eye out for any leaks or drips in your hoses or irrigation system.
Leaks and drips. That seems kind of obvious.
You'd be surprised how much water can be wasted from a tiny leak.
Oh, I bet.
So be proactive, check those hoses regularly, and catch those water wasters before they become a problem.
Gotcha. It's the little things that add up.
Speaking of problems, let's tackle a big one for many gardeners: weeds.
Weeds. Ugh, they're the worst. Stealing water and nutrients from my precious plants. How do I get rid of them?
Well, the best defense is a good offense, right?
True.
A thick layer of mulch can really help suppress weed growth, and staying on top of weeding regularly will prevent those little invaders from taking over.
So it's all about staying vigilant and keeping those weeds in check.
Exactly. And if you do get a weed infestation, remember there are eco-friendly ways to deal with them.
Oh, like what?
Hand pulling, hoeing, solarizing the soil, you know. And there are even some organic herbicides out there that are made from natural ingredients.
So we can be tough on weeds without harming the environment.
Exactly. Remember, every drop of water we save, every weed we prevent, every drought-tolerant plant we choose, it all makes a difference.
It really is amazing how all these techniques work together, you know?
It is, yeah.
We can have beautiful gardens and save water at the same time.
Exactly. And it's not even that hard. A few simple changes can make a big difference.
I'm feeling really inspired to get out there and try some of these things in my own garden.
Me too.
Any last bits of advice for our listeners before we wrap things up?
Just remember, every drop counts. Don't underestimate the power of small actions.
That's so true. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have, yeah. It's been a great deep dive.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into water conservation techniques. We hope you've learned some valuable tips and tricks that you can use to create a more sustainable and beautiful garden. Until next time, happy gardening.